Namaste, Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. This is Dr. David Frawley, joining you from the Southern Rocky Mountains in the United States at an elevation of more than 2,000 meters from the other side of the world. But I'm very honored to be with you today on this most important topic that has inspired me throughout my life, which is Swami Vivekananda and also Paramahansa Yogananda. I'm happy to note it is the 125th anniversary of Swami Vivekananda's triumphal return to India in 1897, which I believe he must have been in the West for about 4 years. And I would like to specially thank Swami Vimurtananda, the Adhyaksha of the Ramakrishna Mutt in Thanjavur, and I'm very honored to be part of this group of illustrious speakers addressing this important event overall. I want to address, first of all, my experience with Ramakrishna and Vivekananda. I first discovered the Ramakrishna, the great master, when I was a young person in my late teens in the United States. And it was one of the most inspiring books I ever came across. And it shaped my life in many ways and introduced me to the great yogic spirituality of India and took me from a kind of Western intellectual background into the more Vedic vision that has served to move my life. In the interim, I have been involved in Vedic studies on various levels, yoga, Vedanta, Ayurveda, all aspects of the Indian spirituality, translating Vedas, Upanishads, and of course, many other related works and teachings, studying Advaita Vedanta, Sri Aurobindo, Ramana Maharshi, and so many more, but also under the inspiration of Swami Vivekananda, and also under the inspiration of Paramahansa Ramakrishna. So today I want to address a few things. Basically, it is my view that Vivekananda did for science, did for spirituality, I should say, what Einstein did for science. So I would say Vivekananda is something like the revolutionary scientist changing the world in terms of spirituality, just as Einstein brought the theory of relativity. Both lived about the same time. Actually, Swami Vivekananda a little bit earlier, and Swami Vivekananda had his impact a little bit earlier, and much broader, you might say, influencing all aspects of science, religion, spirituality, East and West, India, Europe, the United States. So it marked a new era. What do I mean by this new era? He took us away from religion as merely a belief system, often exclusive in nature, judgmental, or even at best allied with certain charities, but not involved with any real change of human consciousness. So he brought us to what I would call experiential spirituality at an individual level, as apart from the old organized beliefs and their more kind of collective practices. He introduced the Vedic view of spirituality as a sadhana, not just simply as a faith, a belief, or adapting a certain point of view that might exclude or go against others. Like Einstein, he taught us that the world is an illusion of the senses, the Vedantic view, relativity of time and space, but he also introduced us to what Einstein did not, which is the Supreme Brahman and Param Atman, the idea of a universal consciousness and transcendent being, not simply the idea of it, but the realization of it. So he took us where you might say Einstein was kind of intuiting, but he took us to that cosmic, universal, transcendent reality in a practical and experiential model and way and inspiration. At the same time, we could say he united science and spirituality and science and religion. And he talked about the science of spirituality and a spiritual science of consciousness, not just a material science of outer measurement and experience, but an inner science and knowing of meditation and also related practices. So he moved us into experiential spirituality, which did not have boundaries of nation, creed, color, gender. In fact, it embraces all living beings. It's not just limited to the physical. It embraces all levels of the universe, from this dense physical realm to the subtle dream astral realms to the deeper levels of creative consciousness, and of course, connecting that all to our true self. Up to that time, the concept of self wasn't really studied or recognized in most of the religions of the world. God and you were different. That was certainly my Catholic upbringing that I went through, going through Catholic schools up until the age of about 10. So this idea that the divine is your own inmost self, of course, is the foundation of the Vedantic tradition, but at the same time, it wasn't known. And of course, self is relevant to everyone, but not self as the physical self or the psychological self, what we might say the ego mind, but self as the pure awareness beyond body and mind, beyond time and space, beyond birth and death, beyond name and form. So Swamiji brought that Vedantic vision and Vedantic inspiration into a world that did not know about it. And he awakened the youth in the United States, in Europe, in India, to a new cause, a global civilization and culture, a universal science reaching into spirituality, a universal religion that was based upon recognition of the oneself in all beings, an honoring of the divine throughout nature, and also an honoring of the divine in our inmost inner being, behind waking, dream, deep sleep. And even these basic concepts that the world knows about, like karma, what wasn't known anywhere. Rebirth was hardly known. And the idea of moksha or self-realization, liberation also was hardly known. He brought these into the world sphere. And in addition, he also brought these practices. Nobody talked about meditation then. Few people knew even what it was. Mantra was also almost unknown. We're talking about, of course, outside of India. Yogic practices, whether asana, pranayama, pratyahara, were not known. There was some science of mind things. There were some aspects of theosophy. But overall, the Western world had not been brought in contact with the great tradition of yoga and its various universal applications. So Swami brought that about. He awakened the universal teachings throughout the world, and he brought yoga and Vedanta to a global movement that became one of the most inspirational forces in science and spirituality, of course, up to the present day. So this was a phenomenal change, and one that we must honor today. And he did so as a mere youth. He came to the West not even quite 30 years old. He did not live beyond 40. But in that short time, he broke the barriers of history. He opened humanity beyond time and space, and he opened religion beyond limitation to the boundless self and the unlimited awareness within us and our connection to the greater universe as a whole. We are not just a body. We are not just a creaturely embodied consciousness or mind. We are the entire universe. The self of the universe dwells within us, and we can awaken that within ourselves and also in others and change humanity in a fundamental way. This was certainly the vision and inspiration of Swami Vivekananda. And it was amazing. Of course, he could do this in India, where these traditions were known. It is true that in India, these traditions were suppressed under the colonial British rule. They were not taught or honored properly. So he was a great force of spiritual and cultural awakening in India. But at the same time, for him to do this globally was utterly amazing. That had not been done, of course, in many centuries. In fact, his ability to move and travel, there's no record of another single type individual who was able to bring yoga and Vedanta so far, and also brought an honoring of the teachings, a new renaissance in studying Vedas, Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, Yoga Shastra, Vedanta Shastra, and honoring these great traditions, learning from the Guru, meditating in nature, and also a tradition of dialogue. He discussed the teachings of Vedanta with many great scientists, artists, thinkers, religious figures, East and West, and he did it as a friend, as an inspiration, not just simply as someone propounding a dogma or somebody making, you might say, more moralistic judgments. He made it into a living dialogue and expression. Many of these dialogues have been recorded or copied, and he gave many wonderful talks. His lectures have remained one of the greatest inspirations for me over time, and I continually go back to them. They are as fresh and relevant today as they were in the past, and even more relevant today, because even with the advent of a more advanced science and technology, humanity is still trapped in the same old divisions and conflicts, whether it is nation, race, religion, whether it is humanity versus nature. Our technology has not brought us wisdom. It has made our lives easier. It has made communication easier. But we must remember that the vision of Swami Vivekananda, this vision of universal unity and inner consciousness, and a practice, a sadhana, a way of meditation, is essential for awakening within us the intelligence and insight to direct our powerful new technology in a benefic way. So we master technology from consciousness. We do not follow technology blindly and become a shadow of our own machines. He also brought us the great inspiration of his guru, Paramahansa Ramakrishna, and the many great teachings he gave. And he brought us the vision of Ma Kali, the Divine Mother, who universal mother, that also was hardly known in the world, and awakened, you might say, the whole expanse of the Vedic traditions and yoga traditions for humanity. And of course, he brought this awakening to Mother India. He inspired not simply the independence movement at an outer level, but the independence movement at an inner level, which is the way of self-realization, and not just for the individuals, but for the culture, and also for India to carry on, awaken, and expand all of its dharmic traditions for the benefit of humanity. So I'm very happy to address this great sage, this great person on all levels. He's the ultimate role model for the youth, and he also shows the way of the future for all humanity. So let us once more take his blessings and his guidance and that of his great guru Ramakrishna, and awaken that spirit in our hearts and share it with all humanity, and use it to take our own sadhana to the highest level and bring us to the ultimate self-realization. Hari Om, Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha, Om Tat Sat.